beeswax. Hi, everyone. I was like participating in the chat and I'm like, oh, it's time to start. So it's Mrs. Van, your friendly neighborhood English teacher. Super excited to see you guys today to talk about His Majesty's Dragon. And I know that a number of you are very much looking forward to knowing about the name of this guy. So we did the contest this week and I have a winner who I will announce at the end. So, right? Yes. So, oh, I love this guy. All right, so let's jump in. So happy to be here with you guys today. Okay, so question, who do you like better, Lawrence or Temur? Read this book, but I have like bought all the rest in the series or put them on my wish list or something. So a 5 is that you just can't wait to get more of it, and a 1 being you hate it. So curious how you feel. So okay, I'm seeing a lot of Temeraires. There we go, Lawrence. Lots of 5s. Oh, you guys like it there. Like the book. Nice. Yeah, Strudel Kitty, the character of Lawrence. We're going to talk about that. Yeah. So, interesting. Okay, lots of 5s. Good to know. Good to know. Okay, thank you guys again for such great comments last week. So let's dive in and look at them. Okay, first of all, shout out to Cookie, guardian of the hashtags. And we've got so many. So many. This isn't even all of them. This is just some of them. If you want to see all of them, you can look back in the comments already from today's chat and you will see that she has been putting in nonstop hashtags.
You have Cookie.
I have Cookie. Isn't it spelled right? My husband says I don't have it spelled right. Oh, I have it backwards.
Yeah, it's backwards.
Okay, I have it backwards. Well, we have hashtag for English teacher fail. It's in here somewhere, right? Sorry about that. I got it backwards. Sorry. Okay, we were talking last week about things that you like to eat. Sorry about that, Cookie. We got that conversation last week about things that you might like to eat that nobody else likes to eat. And Deb Coatney said boxed macaroni and cheese and barbecue sauce. And I just laughed because my husband absolutely loves to put barbecue sauce on. Oops, you might see some craziness with the screen here because I realized that it wasn't looking quite right. My husband likes to put barbecue sauce on everything, like everything. And he has a particular barbecue sauce he likes, which is Sweet Baby Ray's. And unless it's something like I'm cooking with barbecue sauce, and then he prefers Kraft. So Deb Coatney, you and my husband can totally be friends with barbecue sauce. When we first got married, I was so offended because I was like, he doesn't like my cooking, but it ended up being okay. Is something wrong?
Yeah, the Bex bar on the side.
I may have fixed it by now.
Oh, you may have fixed it by now.
Maybe. We'll see.
You fixed your...
Oh, and it didn't. My husband's saying I got a black bar on the side. So let me I have to go in the back end here to, that's it. Yeah, I got to fit it again. Sorry about that, you guys. I want to make sure it's right. Do you remember when we had that randomness with the, when it was just static? That was so just crazy. Okay, boxed macaroni and cheese. So shout out for barbecue sauce. Then Erin said, guys, we should make a hashtag shirt and then wear it during the class and send her pictures of us. And I was just like, okay, yes, you should. So love that. And then Clef said, Jason, I guess when you only have 51 years, you have to set your bar a little lower. And I just love that. Like, I just love it when you guys take something that I say and you just run with it and you make it your own. And it's so exciting. And Elizabeth Heyer said, I think I will put on my uniform and gaze at the sea while in exile. And I loved this one. This was a reference to when Napoleon was exiled on the island of St. Helena at the end, right? His last exile. And I showed you guys that painting where he's standing there like in full dress uniform, gazing out across the sea. So I thought this was hysterical. And then Erin, when Mrs. Vanstar is your friendly neighborhood English history and art teacher. So we got into it last week, didn't we? We had language arts, we had history, we had art, lots of art on the paintings. And so it was really fun. Now, the truth is that I do teach English and social studies. So, and it's hard to teach those without using art. So, and one of the things I haven't ever taught it, but I can teach, like I'm certified to teach it, is humanities, which includes the arts. So, and music, which I did a little bit of music in my side of the mountain. But anyway, all right, so you guys are awesome again and ready to dive in. So this is what has happened so far. We have that they find this dragon egg on the ship. The dragon chooses Will Lawrence. He's then forced into the Corps, which is the aerial corps, the people who manage dragons. He has this altercation, and I put that in there, and I wanted to know, what altercation do you think I'm referring to? Because I think you could say that there were several. So, little altercation, goes home, and then goes on to training in Scotland. So that's just kind of the overall gist of what's gone on so far. And I'll just say, just a shout out to Deb Coney, who Michael tried super hard to get these maps working, and he did these maps where he showed, like, on a regular map, a real map, all the places that had happened here. And I just couldn't get the resolution to work right with the slides, because stuff has to be super sharp to look right in this format. But shout out to him for figuring that out. Okay, so we start off in the very beginning, and by very beginning I mean the dedication, with a whale of a word, sine qua non. So what this, okay, so let before I go on here, what this word means is without which not. So it's Latin. Any of you who speak Latin-based languages like Spanish or French might recognize that sin, like sin, as meaning like without. So in Latin, without which not. What it means is something that is absolutely essential or necessary. And I think it's such a lovely thing to put in a dedication. So it said, for Charles, without which not, right? So basically, without me, or without you, right? It couldn't be. And so I went and found out this is her husband, and his name is Charles. His name is Charles Ardai, and he is a writer. He actually founded an internet company called Juno, which, if you were my age, would mean something to you. Yeah, you're right, Will. It is a 3-word whale of a word. It's a phrase. And he also is a founder and editor of a thing called Hard Case Crime, which is this pulp style paperback crime, but like from the 50s. And he's made that happen. And what I thought was the most interesting thing about him is that he's the child of 2 Holocaust survivors. And so it's amazing that they both survived and they were able to have this child, and now he's married. Anyway, kind of cool, but we're starting right in on that, and that's the dedication. Okay, so chapter 1, here we go. Chapter 1. It starts with this. The deck of the French ship was slippery with blood. The first line of the book. And it's so interesting. I'm curious, what do you guys think is the effect of throwing the reader right into the middle of a scene, right? Like, you don't even know. There's a somewhat related literary device that you can use. It's called in media res, which means in the middle of things. But this isn't exactly in media res, but it is this idea that the reader is essentially catapulted right into the center of action. There's no explication. There's no backstory. There's just, here you are in the middle of a battle and the ship is slippery with blood. I was just curious about what you think about that. So now, I thought that this made me think about interesting openings of novels. And so I am going to share with you some opening lines. And if you know what it is, I'd like to see your guess. Or if you don't know what it is, but you have a guess, I'd like to see your guess. and I will show you what they really are. Okay, so if you in the chat can stop chatting about stuff unrelated to the book, let's do this. So making some guesses. Call Me Ishmael. Anybody know? Anybody know what book that is? I'm going to give you guys a second, like just a second. Oh, I'm seeing some of the comments come in about how you felt about the book just starting right in the middle. I think it's kind of cool. All right, so I'm just going to give a few seconds in between these. So if you know it, put it in. This line, Call Me Ishmael, is the opening line of the Melville novel Moby Dick, which is the favorite. He's a high school art teacher, and this is his favorite book. So Call Me Ishmael. Okay, and then many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Well, this is just a so cool beginning. And this book is, I'll just give a couple seconds. 100 Years of Solitude by Marquez. All right, next. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Couple of, let you go for guesses, see if anybody knows. Anna Karenina. So fantastic Russian novel. All right, next first line. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. This one is one I remember reading for the first time. Like, I remember reading it and going, what? Like, what? How can the clock strike 13? That's so crazy. And this is from 1984. George Orwell's 1984. All right. Next. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. So somebody in here has to have already had to read this in school, which I think is a shame because it's a book that should be read for love, not the money of grades. But it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epic of belief. It was the epic of incredulity. It was a season of light. It was a season of darkness. It was a spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. And for those of you asking what my email is, it's just my name, lisa@lisavangamert.com. Yeah, well, Strudel Kitty, they would be striking one if it weren't dystopic fiction. And I see some of you know this one. It is not Great Expectations. It is A Tale of Two Cities. Some of you got that one right. So, and some of you knew it was the author, right? You had the right author. Nice. Okay, next. There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. Oh, I love this one. I love this one. Okay, and that's from Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And that is one of the Chronicles of Narnia. So if you've read the Chronicles of Narnia, that was it. So isn't that a fun feeling when you get them right? I see some of you saying, I got that one right? And that not on Voyage of the Dawn Treader yet, but in some of the earlier ones. And that feeling, that's dopamine. That's actually a neurotransmitter going through. Okay, so now this is the opening line of my favorite novel. And I would bet that nobody in here has read it. I would guess it's not really, it's not popular, and it's well known among people with degrees in literature, but otherwise not. But this is its opening line. The opening line of my favorite novel is, Miss Brooke had that kind of beauty which seems to be thrown into relief by poor dress. And there's nothing spectacular about this opening line. And actually what I love the most about the book is the closing lines. So the book is called Middlemarch, and it is written by George Eliot, who's actually a woman. That was her nom de plume, or her pen name. And it is about a woman named Dorothea Brooke who lives a very quiet life, and she wants nothing more than to do something really great for the world. Like, she really wants to make a difference. She wants to make her life have meaning. And she struggles, the whole book is about her struggle to make that happen. And I just love it. Mark C says, I've talked about that book before. I just love Middlemarch. I don't necessarily recommend that you guys read it now. I think I read it in high school. That was when I first started reading it, but it just depends on how strong of a reader you are. I would say that there is a BBC miniseries of it that you definitely could read, or watch, I mean, and like it, but love it. Okay, so then if we're gonna go into the naming thing and stay with namings, remember how I always say that names matter, names are important. And the name of the French ship where they find the egg is called the Amity. And that's, I'm anglicizing the pronunciation, but it means like friend, and like friendship, like it's a French name meaning friend. So it's foreshadowing here to call this friend, like when we know, but we don't even know what's on it, that the book is a friend, right? Not in the book, the ship is a friend. It's like a friend to them because it's got this dragon egg, right? And I love this line. It is a dragon egg then. That is the first sign in the book of the magical realism. That's the very first sign that something is different here, that it's not just a book about the Napoleonic Wars. It's not just about the Navy or seafaring. It is got something in there. So, yeah, so, and Anna's like, Anna, who speaks French, says it's friendship. Yeah, so Ami, the A-M-I by itself or with an E, is friend, and then Amity is friendship. And I just think that is really cool because one of the themes that we're looking at this novel through is the theme of friendship. And this is the first sign of magical realism in this book right here. It is a dragon egg then. And then now we have another whale of a word here, which is sinecure. So there are a few words in here that I feel are important to point out and recognize so that you do know what they are, especially words I think you might encounter later. So a sinecure, and it kind of looks like what it is. So we talked earlier in the dedication about sine qua non. This is sine again, without, and in some ways it's like this means like without care. So like a manicure is like caring for your nails, right? This is without a care essentially. And what this is, a sinecure is, on page 11 it says the Navy is no sinecure. A sinecure is a job that you make a lot of money, but you don't really have any responsibility. So it's a cushy job where you get paid well and you have a lot of status, but you don't really do anything. I don't know if any of you can think of jobs like that. These are like jobs where you have a title and maybe even a big fat paycheck or status, but you don't really do anything. You don't have any responsibilities. So I don't know if any of you can do that. So my French is terrible, Christine. I do speak French in a manner of speaking. So I took French so my mother speaks beautiful French. My mother has been mistaken for Parisian in Paris. I've been eating lunch with her in the Musée d'Orsay, which is my favorite museum in the world, by the way. And we were eating lunch in the cafe there, and the waiter thought my mother was from Paris, and my mother is from California like I am. So my mother speaks absolutely beautiful French, and she spoke a lot of French to me growing up. I took French in both high school and college. And I used it when I lived in Europe. So I lived in Germany. And so I speak some French, I speak some German, I speak some Spanish, and my grandparents were deaf, so I speak some sign language as well. Although they've been dead a long time, and so they're dead, so I don't get to practice, but of course now they can hear, not deaf anymore. So sinecure, can any of you think of this? Okay, like generals in World War II, no, I definitely would say that is not a sinecure. And then Duke, King, yeah, maybe, right? Like maybe. So the first admiral that we meet, yeah, maybe so, right? I'm looking at this. Oh, that's so cool, Clef, that your mom is a French and Spanish teacher and that you lived in Germany for a while. I'd be interested in knowing where you lived. I lived in Wiesbaden, which is near Frankfurt. Oh, and Anna, that's so cool that you go to a French school. It's beautiful to know another language. So then here is where we find out that if you are the one who the hatchling attaches to, then if a hatchling lets you put it into harness, duty forever after tied you to the beast. So this is like the gift that keeps on giving, right? And this is where we find out that, oh, this is kind of a problem, right? I'm loving looking at some of your answers coming into Sinecure. And he says, still exploring, the dragon came past him. It sat up on its haunches and to look at him, inquisitive, and to look at him. I think I might have a typo there. English teacher fell. And Lawrence gazed down at it in unconcealed sorrow and dismay. And this is the moment. This is the moment that sets our story in motion, because the dragon connects with Will right here, right here. The dragon's choosing him is the inciting incident in this story. All right, so why do you think the dragon chooses him? Why do you think? There are all these people, they sent the one guy. Why do you think? Curious to see your answers coming in. All right. Then he says, this is an interesting dynamic, right? So the men of the corps are honored for their courage and devotion, but the prospect of entering their ranks is not going to be appealing to a gentleman raised up in respectable society. So it's like they're respected, but somehow not. And like it's cool to be in it, but also not. And I was trying to think about who else this was true of. Like what other group it could be, like both an honor and a problem with it. And so I thought of a couple. One is the fellowship. So the fellowship of the ring, right? Like it's cool, but you're also headed to Mordor. And so people respect you, but nobody wants to be you. And then I have another one, which is the Night's Watch in Game of Thrones, where again, like people respect you and they need you, but nobody wants to be you. So curious if you see some of that. It's curious if you see some of that. All right. And then there's this insight. So we get a lot of insight into Will Lawrence's character here and what he says. Now, we've already seen his thoughts when he was trying to figure out what to do about who was going to be the one they were going to try to get the dragon to bond to. And we've already seen his actions and how he handled that. And now we're going to dive in a little bit more into how we're getting the hashtags. I'm saying hashtags because I'm getting distracted by this chat and I it's getting annoying. So you guys get back on track into the book. And if you don't feel like you can, just go and come back and watch it later if you want to, but don't mess with this. Insert repeat of off-task chat lecture that you guys got before. Insert it right here. All right, so this is this insight into Will's character that he recognizes when he recognizes when something hard has to be done and he's going to do it anyway. And so I'm looking, okay, Jason, the tributes for the Hunger Games. Yes, absolutely. Oh, the Order of the Phoenix. Ooh, that's an interesting one, Anna. We could really do that. Yeah, I'm looking at this really kind of interesting. So nice. Yeah, the Order of the Phoenix and the Deathly Hallows. Yeah, nobody wants to be that. Yeah, so cool. All right. Then, so I want to explore character for a second. So how does an author tell us about a character? What do they do? Like, what does an author have in their toolbox in order to get us as readers to relate to characters, to understand characters, to really dive into them? So let's look at character for just a little bit. We're going to insert little things. So there are different types of characterization. An author can use indirect characterization, which is where they share the character's thoughts, words, and actions. And then the reader has to make the inferences. It is up to the reader to say, what does this action say about the character? What does this thought say about the character? What do these words say about the character? The reader, it's on the reader, right? That's why it's indirect. The narrator isn't telling you specifically. The author isn't telling you specifically. It's on you. Another type of indirect characterization is the way that other characters talk about the character, the ways that other characters interact with that character, right? So like if everybody is scared of them, if everybody is angry with them, if everybody loves them, if everybody talks about them in nice ways or mean ways, right? Like, and again, burden on the reader. The narrator isn't giving it to you. The burden's on the reader. Now, then you have direct characterization. And direct characterization is when the narrator specifically says he was a good person, or she was a person of integrity, or she was strong, or it was this, right? So you can get this like two different kinds of characterization to where that enable you to learn about the character. And there are 4 different kinds of characters, really only 4 different kinds of characters. So you can have either a round character, flat character, and dynamic or static, and then those interact. So I made this little graph for you. It's almost like if you've learned genetics and like a Punnett square, it kind of looks like that a little bit. So dynamic characters are characters that change from the characters who change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. Static characters are characters who stay the same from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. They may still have things happen to them, but those things don't act on them. Round characters are characters that we really understand. Flat characters are characters that we don't really learn that much about. So you can have a character that is both round and dynamic, and that is considered, that I have it in green, not only because blue and yellow make green, but because green is go, right? Green is what we want. This is the ultimate in characterization. When you have a protagonist, and usually this is the protagonist, that you truly understand the character and that the character makes a change. So somebody asked, is Lauren, what kind of character is Lauren? That is the kind of character that Lawrence is. Okay, so then round and static is where you have a character who you really understand, you get them, but they don't change. And you can sometimes find this as a protagonist in children's books, right? Like Curious George. Which I've been reading nonstop almost to my granddaughter. Specifically, Curious George rides a bike. My 2-year-old granddaughter loves that book and The Cat and the Hat. And I think The Cat in the Hat is another somewhat roundish, but definitely static character. You have a dynamic character that is flat is not really possible. You can't really have a character who changes, but you don't know anything about the character, because if you don't know anything about the character, you wouldn't know if they changed, right? If a flat character sometimes seems to change, it's likely due to poor writing, where the author didn't give you any insight into the character or enough insight to consider it a round character, but they made them change anyway. And so if you see that, then you think to yourself, Mrs. Van would give this person a bad grade on character development because a flat dynamic character is a problem. Static flat characters, every single book has them. Every single book needs them. These are characters who kind of fill in the background. I wrote a whole essay on this a whole paper on this when I was in college, called Furniture People. And they're like the furniture. They're the ones who fill the room, but they don't really move, and people have to move them around. Okay, so you weren't able to read a book because you have to find a way to download it. Well, you can buy the Kindle version. Like, you can buy the Kindle version anywhere. So that's easily done. You could buy the Kindle version, the Nook version. The download is not difficult to find. Okay, so these type of characters, it's important to evaluate the character. Like, what kind of character is this? And we want to know. So how can we currently describe the character of Will Lawrence? What kind of person is he? I don't mean static or dynamic or round or flat. I mean, how would you describe his character? What kind of person do you think that he is? Okay, so let's see. Lauren says she's got the Kindle version. I've got the regular one because we've discussed, like, I'm about real books. But if you can't get it quickly enough, or you prefer to read electronically, then that will work out just great. So I'll watch for what you say about that. Hey, no spoilers. Could you need 42? No spoilers. Okay, so moving on to chapter 2, we start with a whale of a word, prodigious. This word comes up over and over and over again. This is an important word to know. Prodigious on page 40 is where it is. If you have this edition of it, it says, the distance gave him some more idea, and this is talking about Will. The distance gave him some more idea of the dragon's eyesight. It would have to be prodigious to allow him to sight prey at such a range. And what prodigious means is remarkably or impressively great, usually in reference to size or degree. So it comes from the word prodigy, but interestingly is not connected to it in any way. It's from the Latin prodigiosus, which I love that word, prodigiosus. And it means strange, wonderful, marvelous, unnatural. Okay, so I'm looking at this. He's an honorable man who has a kind heart. He's a good person. His dad is sort of abusive. We'll get to that. He's a man of honor. Nice. Yes, he is very formal, Natasha, but also easygoing. Yeah, he has manners, right? He has manners. He's polite. He has a formal vibe. Nice, dedicated, honorable gentleman. Yeah, yeah, Deb Coney, I think you captured him very well there. Caring, persevering, nice, respectable, kind, understanding, nice. Yes, very good. Very good. Okay, I need you, honey, I need you to go back and delete the comment from Dracon Warrior about Tokyo Book. You cannot recommend illegal sites in the chat. And downloading a copyrighted book from a free site is not okay. It's not only illegal, but it is immoral and not good. So do not do that. Do not do it. Just say no to illegal downloading. It's theft and it's wrong. Okay, so prodigious. I think prodigious would make a great spell, right? So I made this little meme. Prodigiosus, right? Because that's the Latin. Prodigiosus, the spell that makes things really big. And wouldn't that be fun? Like if you have read Harry Potter, think of a time where Harry could have used the spell prodigiosus that would make things really big. I think that was super cool. And then we get a shout out to Admiral Lord Nelson in this chapter. And I decided, and it's so fun to watch for things that are real. We talked about it last week, but I decided to go look up all of his titles, and this is it. A lot of titles of his name, and this is who he is. And then there was, which we talked all about this like last thing. So yeah, no worries if you don't know it's good. Now you've got the Mrs. Van Mom lecture about it. Okay, so in the book it says, seen in the Vatican, a painting that Will had seen in the Vatican, a painting of hell, done by Michelangelo with dragons roasting the damsels with fire. It had been very like. So I went looking, as I do, and I couldn't find it. At first, I thought he was referring to this painting, which is called The Final Judgment. I have seen sections of this painting when it went on tour. I have never been to the Vatican, to the Vatican Museum, but this is on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. And I looked all through this painting thinking, is he referring to this one? I searched everywhere for like painting of hell by Michelangelo with dragons. I could not find the painting that is being referred to. So I don't know if this one is real or not. If you find it, let me know. I was kind of curious there. Okay, so then we get this scene. Page 46. It's the very last line, actually, of chapter 2. And it says that Temeraire lowered his head and curled more closely about him, listening with his great eyes shining in the darkness. And so they talked quietly together long into the night. And I wrote a note right here. The real friendship begins. And this is when the real friendship begins. Here it is, right? We've had the story set in motion when the dragon chooses Will. And now we have the moment when the real relationship begins. And remember, one of the things we're looking for in this novel is friendship. So when you're reading it, watch for these moments. Watch for these moments that are sometimes subtle, when it all begins to shift. So I'm seeing that some of you couldn't find it either. Natasha said that was the only painting she could find. Okay, so I am curious. There's some things in this story that, oh, you know what? I think I left, ignore that because I think that's actually a leftover from the last discussion. Sorry about that. English teacher fail. This is the third one today. All right, chapter 3. Chapter 3, we start out in Funchal. They arrive in Funchal. So Funchal is a real city. It is a real city. It is in Portugal. And it is the 6th largest city in Portugal, which I thought was interesting. Irony, little connection, trivia that, anyway. So 6th largest city in Portugal and believed to be one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. You can see where it sits right here on the harbor. This is where it is. And they reference, chapter 3 opens with this, that after they arrive at Funchal, that Admiral Croft's flagship was in port. And the flagship is we think of flagship as being like the front of the fleet, but it is also the ship that flies the nautical flags, and nautical flags have specific meaning. And so I just took a screenshot of just a partial list of, and this is from the Navy. This is a screenshot from the U.S. Navy's website where they talk about nautical flags. And every nautical flag, it represents a letter, but also words and phrases. So what's interesting is that his ship, the Commendable, flies the flag, Captain Report Aboard. And I couldn't find that. I searched through all of them and I couldn't find one that really said that. So I think there's this weird balance going on where some stuff's real and some stuff's not real. It's just kind of interesting. But I don't know if any of you are also interested in vexillology, which is flags, but I love flags and I love looking at nautical flags. So we had a boat when I was growing up and I love to sail and I love learning about nautical flags. So it says, Admiral Croft was waiting for them impatiently. He had evidently heard something about the fuss. And this exchange between Captain Lawrence and Admiral Croft really sets the tone for the novel. It's like Will Lawrence against the world, Will Lawrence like as the voice of reason. And yeah, so thank you for the notice that I do a lot of research for this. Yeah, because you know why? That's where it's fun. The fun is in the research. Like you get into the book when you do the research, it means more, it matters more, it's just more fun. So thank you. There we go. Yes, you can count yourself as a Vanstar even if you have to miss some of the videos because you can go back and watch them later. So the name William means resolute protector. Remember, the names always mean something. Like authors don't just choose a name to choose a name. They choose a name for a reason. And so always with main characters, go look up, like, what does this name mean? Why did this author choose this name? William means resolute protector. And I think it's an interesting choice, right? He's concerned about Temeraire. He's concerned about other men on his ship, including Riley, who he's given the captaincy of the ship. And going back to the idea of characterization, I think right here we see what a lot of you figured out, right? Which is that Will Lawrence is a man of honor and of integrity. So it's I love this. So I'm adding my own hashtag. So Cookie, if you could just add this in. Temeraire says when he can't eat the cows, he says, it seems very strange that the ocean is full of things that one can eat as one likes, and on land, everything seems to be spoken for. I just thought, oh yes, dragon wisdom. That was on page 52 if you're looking at it. There we go. Okay, so there's a hashtag to add. So then Temeraire says this. He says, I should rather have you than a heap of gold, even if it were very comfortable to sleep on. And I think, again, this is just an example of friendship that we see. We don't have to have a hashtag for friendship, but I think this is a scene where we see this friendship growing and developing, that and I think it's kind of funny because the dragon says sleeping on a pile of gold would be very comfortable. And I think all of us know that that's not true, but it's just a moment where I see some of you notice it. It's like, oh, this is sweet, right? It's this sweet, sweet moment. And then he said, Lawrence was left gazing after him in a sensation of mingled amazement and extraordinary pleasure. He could scarcely imagine a similar feeling. And it's like this idea that the Temeraire is awakening in Will feelings and emotions he's never had before either. And they've got this almost parent-child role, but it's shifting into friendship, and that friendship is building and growing. It's so beautiful. And, you know, Temeraire is still only weeks old here, and it reminded me of this quote from a novel of Charles Dickens that said, it is no small thing when they who are so fresh from God love us. And I decided to put in here a picture. So that is my granddaughter, Abigail, just when she was 3 weeks old. And it is no small thing when a child loves you. And it's no small thing when a newborn dragon loves you. And I feel like Will really catches that. So then we get Will going into the store, and they're still in Funchal, and he goes into this store and he wants to buy Timur something. He wants to give him a gift, and he can't afford the one that the guy first shows him, the one that catches his eye. But then he says, however, sir, perhaps this one would do. And when he gets back to Temeraire clutched the chain and would not put it aside. He brooded over it in the candlelight while Will read to him, and turned it this way and that to admire the light upon the gold. And also pearls are in there too. And I just love this scene. It's like the giving of the gift. And the giving of the gift is often very important in stories. Always watch when anybody gives anybody anything. Sometimes it can be evil and sometimes it can be good. And then he goes to this Sir Edward Howe. And Sir Edward Howe is this dragon expert. And he tells him he's a Chinese imperial. And I went and found, so there's this fan wiki for Naomi Novik's novels of Temeraire. And one of her fans had drawn all these pictures of the different kinds of dragons that we're going to learn about in the stories. And I just loved that. And yeah, I love this too. I'm just looking at all of these things. I love seeing your comments on this. And he says, this is what Howe says. He says that that a Chinese imperial is the very best of all possible breeds. Only the celestials are more rare or valuable. And were you one of those, I suppose the Chinese would go to war over our having put you into harness. So we must be glad you are not. And he says, for though I will not rule it out entirely, I think it unlikely that you will be able to breathe fire. And friends, this is like foreshadowing. It's when you see something like this that says, oh, well, there's no way that this is what's happening. It's almost always the way, right? The author is almost always going to do that. As soon as they say, oh, no, it can't ever be this way, friends, it's always going to be that way. And that's exactly what's going on here. Like, you don't even need to get this part. This isn't even a spoiler. I'm going to tell you, I'm calling it now. Like, you don't even have to have gotten there yet. He's going to turn out to be a celestial. Like, this is such obvious foreshadowing, and you've got to watch for that. Okay. And then he meets this guy. He meets this guy. So I'm thinking two things, actually. I'm thinking he's going to turn out to be a celestial, and there's going to be a war with China. That's what I'm thinking in the foreshadowing. So watch for those kinds of things. All right. So then he meets this guy who's in the messenger group, right? And he says, Captain James on Volatilius dispatch service. How old is that dragonette and where did you get him? And Will responds like this. Sir, if you have questions, they can best be answered on the ground. Oops, another English teacher fail. I have a closed quotation, but not open. He said to James a little coldly, there had been a preemptory quality that he did not like in the other man's tone. And it's so interesting because Will puts so much stock in formality and respect, and it's natural because of his social background and because of his time in the Navy. And it's interesting to see how sometimes it makes him hypersensitive. And I think one of the things that you'll see in well-developed characters is that their good qualities and their bad qualities are two sides of the same coin. So his respect is good, but it can make him cold. And so obviously we have to discuss this whale of a word, preemptory, that's here. Preemptory means like commanding immediate attention, like not open to debate, dogmatic, like this, like kind of in your face term. In legal terms, preemptory means it's not open to discussion. It's like a preemptory argument. And it's from the Latin preemptorius, which would also make a really good name for a dragon, probably, which means final or decisive. So maybe Cookie needs to start keeping track of like good dragon names and spell names in addition to hashtags. I feel like this might be an author error though. The use of this word here. Let's go back. I'll show you what I mean. He said there had been a preemptory quality that he didn't like in the other man's tone. I don't think that's what she meant. I actually feel like this is a poor word choice. And if I were her teacher, I would have written WC next to this, which stands for word choice. Word choice. I don't think she means. I think the word she really meant was presumptuous. So presumptuous is like, you know what it means, right? It's like failing to observe the proper boundaries and respect and limits. So curious, do you think it's a mistake or do you think it fits? There we go. All right. And then he says, as the evening wore on, he grew more rather than less conscious of the grief of parting. And this is when they try to get them apart from each other. And he goes along with it. Will goes along with it because he thinks he's trying to do what is best for Temeraire. And they say that. And we see the growing friendship here in Will's attitude that he's willing to sacrifice what he wants for what is best for Temeraire. Now, another note in this sentence is that it's important to read this one in your mind because the emphasis is intended. You have to emphasize the words more rather than less. You have to emphasize more and less when you read it. Make sure that a sentence reads right in your head until it flows, right? Don't just read it as the evening wore on, he grew more rather than less conscious of the grief of parting. In your head, you need to hear, as the evening wore on, he grew more rather than less conscious of the grief of parting. Read it with emphasis in your mind. And then we find out that he has refused to accept the replacement. And we hear Days say, the character Days, it is not to be born, an imperial in the hands of some untrained Navy clodpole. And it's like, whoa, foreshadowing. We know this guy is going to be trouble, right? There's going to be trouble here. And we see the respect that Will Lawrence insists on. It's not just that he gives it, it's that he insists on getting it too. He says, you must answer. You must answer. And that's a duel. That's a challenge to a duel of honor, right? It's like slapping a glove in someone's face. And then when he finds out in the background that that Days is probably not going to get another chance to get a dragon, then he's more understanding. But this damage is done. And then this is what Temeraire says, right? That he said you didn't like dragons and that you wanted to be back on your ship, and he said you only flew with me out of duty. Now, what do you think of the way that the Navy handled this? Like, do you think, I guess it's the Corps, really, not the Navy, it's the Corps, the aerial Corps, and how they try to switch the guy to a new, like the Three Musketeers, the duel. Yeah, Natasha, good insight. This way that they try to force fit a new person with Temeraire. Do you think that's the right way to do it? Like, I know some of you are very offended on Will's behalf there. Yes. So he said, this is what Temeraire says. If you would like to have your ship back, I will let someone else ride me. I will not make you stay. And then Lawrence says, I would rather have you than any ship in the Navy. And we see this friendship again, this key moment. And this is a key moment because they're both choosing the friendship. They're both making a decision, right? So like this moment where I'm deciding I am with you and you are deciding that you are with me. And Temeraire gives kind of a gift of the Magi kind of gift, right? Like I'm going to give up what I want most. And Will surrenders his dreams of a lifetime in favor of this friendship, and it's powerful. And this is at the very end of chapter 3. It's a very, very key moment. When we sacrifice something for someone, that's how we show the true depth of our feelings, right? So some of us don't like how they handled it, right? So chapter 4, it opens with a reference to the blockage of Toulon on the first page, and this is a painting of the blockage, essentially a blockade of Toulon. And it's cool how she blends real stuff like this was a real thing that happened with that fantasy side. And right before the reference to the blockade, it says most of Bonaparte's dragons are stationed along the Rhine. Well, the Rhine is a real river. I used to live right on it, but I can tell you, having lived on it, there are no dragons there. So it's this cool blend. He said he had only once had a truly unhappy experience at his naval service under Captain Barstow. And that's kind of interesting. If you have the book handy, it's on pages 92 and 93. And he says, this is what he says about that experience. He says that Captain Barstow was an older man, a relic of an older Navy, where officers had not been required to be gentlemen as well. Barstow was the illegitimate son of a merchant of only moderate wealth and a woman of only moderate character. He had gone to sea as a boy in his father's ships and had been pressed into the Navy, meaning forced into the Navy as a foremast hand. And that just means someone who takes care of a mast at the front of the ship. He had displayed great courage in battle and a keen head for mathematics, which had won him promotions, on and on and on. But he had never lost any of the coarseness of his background. And what was worse, he had been conscious of his own lack of social graces and resentful of those who, in his mind, made him feel that lack. It was not unmerited resentment. There were many officers who looked askance and murmured at him, but he had seen in Lawrence's easy and pleasing manners a deliberate insult, and he had been merciless in punishing Lawrence for them. Barstow's death of pneumonia 3 months into the voyage had possibly saved Lawrence's own life, and at least had freed him from an endless days of standing double or triple watches, a diet of ship's biscuit and water, and the perils of leading a gun crew composed of the worst and most unhandy men aboard. That is such great characterization in one paragraph. We learn so much about this character, but we also learn a lot about Will, that sometimes people misread him, that sometimes people see his formality and his respect as condescension and disrespect. And so that is very interesting. And I think this isn't a line from the story. This is something I'm saying. We hate those who show us our weaknesses. And I think that is something that the author would like us to figure out from this little passage. I just saw somebody said the Berlin Blockade with dragons. Oh, that would be amazing. They're talking about after World War II when the Allies and the divide up Berlin. Oh, that would be amazing. Okay. I think this influenced Will Lawrence as well, right? I think he believes in the manners of the social order, and I think he was influenced by that. So he goes home, and what's funny is that Deb Coatney Michael had emailed me about maps, and I'd already put some mappage in the slide deck because I wanted you to see where this is. So Will, on his way to the training in Scotland, asks for permission and receives it to go home to Nottinghamshire, where his family is from. And if you're familiar with the story of Robin Hood, it's set in Nottinghamshire, if you remember the Sheriff of Nottingham. So it's a real place. And this is the house. And she references an actual real house, Wallerton Hall. And it is a real house. So I went to go look at it. It's still standing. This is a picture of it. It was built in the 1580s. This is a picture of it that was taken in the early 1600s, or painting that was done of it in the early 1600s. And it was built in the 1580s for the Willoughby family. So it's the wrong family. So it's again how Novik does this. She's got like this real house, but the wrong family. And it was built for the Willoughby family, and they lived in it. And they were nobles. They were aristocracy. They were titled lords, and there still is a baron. I think they're barons. And in the 1920s, they sold it to the city essentially, and it is a natural history museum. And it does other things too. And it has been the setting. I'll go back here so you can see. It's been the setting in a couple of movies. So in Dark Knight Rises, it was filmed outside Wallerton Hall. There's a scene there. The hall was featured in as the latest Wayne Manor in the Batman movies. And it is 5 miles north of the town of Gotham, where Gotham City got its name. So kind of interesting, right? Yeah. So there you go. So Willoughby was the last name of the family. So then his dad says this to them. His dad says his reception from his dad is as cold as ice. That's why I have this picture of this. I mean, it's so amazing. He says, "You will oblige me, sir, by avoiding this house in future and our residence in London." I mean, he's just so cold. And then he has Edith, right? Which they're supposed to get married, but she's like, "Yeah, you know what, dude? I've waited a long time for you, and I was willing to wait for you when you were going to be a naval officer, but I was going to live in this big house and be like the mistress of the manor, but if you're going to go and be in the aerial corps and I'm just hardly ever going to see you, I'm going to live this life of isolation in the wilds of Scotland. Yeah, not about that." And he doesn't begrudge her, but he's still sad. And I'm wondering what you think about that. I mean, it's a big ask, right? It's a big ask, and he has no expectation that she'll stay, but it's kind of interesting. And then Will's mother gives this very different reaction. She goes out to meet Temeraire, and even though she won't ride him, like she won't take a ride on him or a flight with him, she does talk to him, and she's interested in him, and she gives compliments to him. And she says, she says to Will, like, "Oh, did you read this book to him?" And again, Novik plays with it a little bit, because she calls the book the Naval Trident. But I went and looked it up, and it was actually called the British Trident. And and a trident is that fork that, like, it's Neptune's weapon. It's that three-pronged thing. It's the spear essentially for the sea. So there is a real book, and it was a real book that was written, and it's pretty cool, but she changed the name a little bit. Yeah, I love Lawrence's mother too. So many of you are nice. Okay, so the last chapter for today in our last few minutes here, chapter 5, they go to Locke Logan, and guess what? It's a real place. Here's a picture of it. Really, look this stuff up as you're reading. I mean, it's so amazing. Well, or you can wait till I do it. But when you're reading a book, not with me, be sure to look it up. So Will arrives, and he's very surprised to find a dragon in charge of the training, Solaris. And and Solaris asks him this. He has no special offensive capability showing, as I understand it. And I'm like, more foreshadowing, right? So, and he says, it's a pity, for we could do with one of those Japanese poison spitters or water spout makers. And again, this is more foreshadowing. And the reader is like, just you wait, right? Just wait, because we know that Temeraire is going to be this amazing celestial, right? That he's going to put these guys to shame, right? It's so amazing. And Will sees this. Will says this, he says, what would the world think to know they were trained, meaning the dragons and even the men, given orders by one of the beasts they supposedly controlled? And this is this interesting thing. It happened. This scene is at the top of page 117. And it's kind of curious because who does it benefit to keep this from people? Like, who benefits from keeping the secret? Kind of interesting. Okay, so we get then this scene where Granby, who is a friend of Lieutenant Day's, who's rude and resentful, says he had to make it clear to the man that the disrespect would not be tolerated. Sir, it is straightforward enough, sir. And he makes him say that. And what's interesting is that Novik is making foreshadowing clear that there's a problem here, but it's hard to tell which relationships are going to be important and which aren't. Like, is the relationship with Admiral Croft, whom he also crossed, going to be important? How about his father? How about Lieutenant Days? Like, all of this. We've got Granby, who is super rude and who Will figures out is friends with Lieutenant Days, and he decides to make sure the lines are clear. And this goes back to what we mentioned before, right? Like, this is so important to Will. We learn a lot about Will's character here. All right, so Will is more comfortable with the younger boys because he's used to the relationship with apprentices in the Navy, right? And they all want to work with him. I went and found a picture of like how young were boys in the Navy, and super young, right? I think the boys like the strength they see in Will. I think they recognize a leader when they see one. And he says, and he's talking about cleaning the dragon, and he says, certainly it is a great deal of work, but so are many other things that ought to be done. And again, this is Will throwing down truth. There are some real gems of philosophy here in the novel. So, and he's upset that they don't clean the dragons. And he says it was appalling to a man raised to daily holy stoning of the deck that aviators should leave their beasts to keep themselves clean. So I had to go look up what is holy stoning. And holy stoning is actually the use of a piece of sandstone to clean the wood of the deck. And so he's used to this. He's used to guys scrubbing the deck on their hands and knees every day in the Navy. And he does not understand why they could leave their dragons unclean and not taken care of. And it gives him insight. It changes him a little bit. When Will recognizes the way that they're treating the dragon and he doesn't like it, he thinks it's bad, he thinks it's negative, it makes him take a closer look at how he treats Temeraire. And I've had that myself. I go to someone else's house, or I'm in someone else's classroom, or I watch someone else with their kids, and I think, oh, do I do that? Like, I wonder if I could be better at that. Kind of interesting. And he says, we see that Will here, when he says to Timur, I do beg your forgiveness, we see that he expects from himself the same respect that he demands from others. And then this is Temeraire, like, oh, are you sure you don't want that other dragon? He would be easier to clean. He's kind of petulant when he says this to Will. He says it out of fear, out of jealousy. Remember that true meaning of jealousy, like wanting to keep things to myself, being afraid that something you have will be taken away from you. And Temeraire says this, and the ironic thing is that sometimes we're afraid of being unlikable, or afraid that people won't like us, and we act unlikable out of that fear. It's real irony. It's a real dynamic in relationships. And Timur says this, I don't understand why his handler hasn't come. You wouldn't stay away from me that long, would you? And Will says, never in life unless I was kept away by force. And again, me as the reader is like, ooh, I think there may be some foreshadowing here, but I think that it's really what all of our friends need from us is this assurance that we will not abandon them, that we will not leave them. And then we get this allusion to Tartars. So Tartars this is the area of Tartary. And it's a reference, really, an allusion to the Mongols. And it is an idiom. It's an idiomatic British expression that they use if you're a Tartar. You're someone who's like bossy or domineering. And he says, this is Will. He could not help but long for the comforting strictures of the Navy, which had encompassed all of his life. And I just do think that rules can be a comfort. And I wondered if any of you could relate to how he feels with that. He says, it had not been an auspicious first day. He was both weary and discouraged. And of course, we have to end with a whale of a word, auspicious, which means conducive to success or favorable or promising. Like, oh, that's auspicious, right? That looks like it might work out well. Okay, so last question of the day, agree or disagree? How are we feeling? Like, do we agree that it hasn't been an auspicious day, that this did not start out well? Do we think that Will's day has not gone well, his first day of dragon training, or not? Yeah. So I'm looking at some of your things. Comforting strictures. Yeah, things that are rules that are somehow comforting. Like we find safety in that. Maybe in rules that your parents have, or just the friendliness of the expected and the normal. So we're looking at this through the prism of friendship, luck, and strategy. And so I'm curious, how has he been lucky? And how has he been strategic? Can you see any ways that he's been... No, I only said about whether he's a celestial. We don't know that. I am only saying that because I think the foreshadowing. I'm reading the foreshadowing of it. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Oh, thank you for figuring that out, Lauren. Okay, and then for the next thing, look for, you're going to be reading these chapters 6 through 8, looking for friendship, luck, and strategy. Okay, so here we go. Oh, I can't wait to go read some of those. All right, the contest, here we are. Okay, so our dragon puppet, so cool. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how this worked. I went through the list. There were 27 suggestions, and I eliminated all that were real characters. So, like Puff the Magic Dragon was suggested by a couple of people, or Merlin, who is a real character. I eliminated those because they already existed as a name of some particular dragon or person. I eliminated all of them that were named after video games, which was a shocking number. If it was connected to a video game, a character in a video game, or a name of a video game, I instantly eliminated it. I eliminated all that were negative connotations. Like it had a bad, like somebody could read it as negative. I eliminated ones that were really hard to say or to spell. And I didn't, people are saying you didn't specify. I didn't know I was going to do it until I started looking through the names. And I'm like, well, I need him to have his own name. I don't want to be riffing off of that. But I didn't know what I was looking for until I started looking at it. And I wanted a solid name. I decided I wanted to go for one that was solid, like the ones in the book, like not flippant, not too casual. So, yeah. And so after I got to that, I then narrowed it down beyond that to this is the winner. The name is Serignus. And the person who submitted it said that it loosely translates cloudfire. And of course, we know cirrus clouds. I couldn't find that definition, but one of the things I liked about it was I felt like it sounded like a dragon. I thought it sounded like a dragon name like we'd have in this story. It's unusual, but couldn't be found, but not that difficult to spell. Serignus. And I thought it was cool. So I don't really I don't know. I can tell you what some of, it seems like there's some interest in it. I can tell you what some of the others were if you want to hear what some of the other ones were. So the person put their email address in, and I didn't recognize the person had their name as Alexandra. I don't want to say the last name, but it wasn't a name that I recognized. So if you're in here, it could have been someone who watched it later. I thought it was good. Okay, so some of them I really liked, but like one of them.
It's Cloudfall.
It was Cloudfall?
It looks like.
Was it really?
So it looks like.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay. So some of them that were cool were Lene suggested one that was Feu Merveilleuse, which is like marvelous fire, which I loved, but it was too hard to say. I didn't do second or third places. I just did the first place. A lot of them were just video games. I mean, video game. So I didn't do those. One of them I really liked. It was Firestar, but fire spelled with a Y, but that was a YouTube video thing. I liked Scale Wing. I think that's a cool name for a dragon, but again, it was a video game. There were somebody, this was clever. Somebody put my name and COVID together and made Kovangan, which was cool. I liked what was it? A lot of them did like Smaug. This was clever. This was a funny one. Bone of Part, like kind of like Joan of Arc and like Bonaparte. So that was kind of cool. So that was amazing. So I am so glad, like I have to be honest, I'm so glad it's somebody who always comes to class because I couldn't tell from the email address because it wasn't the same. So congratulations to you. I'm glad that it was one of the Vanstars who won the thing. And I will be sending you, and you'll get an email. I'm going to be sending you a $50 Amazon gift card, which is enough to buy one for yourself or books or anything else that you want, really. But I'll be sending that. You'll get it in the mail or in your email, and I'll send it to the email that was in the document. So congratulations to you. Thank you all for entering. And the thing is, if I eliminated right away if it was something else. So like Jay Sand is asking, and that Forza is a video game, so it got eliminated right away. So because if it was that. So anyway. Yes, Simon Hay Sutton, yours was funny. Smaug, the guard of toilet paper. Unfortunately, Smaug was a real dragon. So we did that. So congratulations, and we will see you next week with chapters 6 through 8. This is Mrs. Vanstar signing off.